The garden shouldn't have existed at all, not in that God-forsaken stretch of Arizona territory where even the sagebrush looked half dead, and the ground cracked open like old leather under the relentless sun of 1882. Cole Brennan had been riding for 3 days straight, his horses' hooves kicking up dust devils that swirled and died in the scorching air, when he saw the impossible splash of green against the brown and rust-colored landscape. At first, he thought it was a mirage, one of those cruel tricks the desert played on a man when his canteen ran low and his mind started to wander. But as he drew closer, squinting against the glare, he could make out distinct rows of plants, their leaves catching what little moisture the air held, thriving where nothing should grow. A woman stood among those rows, her back to him, bent over with a wooden bucket in one hand. She wore a simple cotton dress the color of faded cornflowers, and her dark hair was twisted up and pinned at the back of her head, though strands had escaped to curl damply against her neck. Cole reined in his horse about 20 yards from the edge of the garden, not wanting to spook her or trample whatever miracle she had coaxed from this unforgiving earth. She must have heard his approach because she straightened and turned, one hand moving to shade her eyes. Even from this distance, Cole could see the wariness in her posture, the way she held herself ready to bolt or fight, whichever proved necessary. Women alone out here had to be ready for anything. "Afternoon, ma'am," he called out, keeping his hands visible on the saddle horn. "I don't mean any trouble, just passing through and saw your garden, never seen anything like it in country this dry." She studied him for a long moment, and he studied her right back. She was younger than he had first thought, probably mid-20s, with a face that might have been called pretty if it weren't so marked by sun and determination. Her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, and they looked at him with an intelligence that made him sit up a little straighter in the saddle. "Most people don't see it at all," she said finally, her voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "They just ride on by, looking for water or shade or whatever else they think they need." "You need something, Cowboy." Cole dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and unthreatening. His horse snorted and tossed its head, eager for the water trough he could see near a small adobe structure that served as her dwelling. "My horse could use some water if you can spare it. I can pay." "I don't need money," she said, but she gestured toward the trough anyway. "Go ahead. Any creature that makes it out here deserves a drink." He led his horse over and let the animal drink while he took in the full scope of what she had accomplished. Tomatoes grew on carefully constructed stakes, their fruit still green but promising. Squash vines sprawled across the ground, their broad leaves providing their own shade. He saw beans climbing up strings tied to wooden poles, and what looked like peppers and onions in neat rows. At the far end of the garden, a few straggly fruit trees struggled but lived, their leaves a defiant green. "How long have you been working this land?" he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his usual taciturn nature. She set down her bucket and walked closer, though she still maintained a careful distance. Up close, he could see the calluses on her hands, the strength in her forearms, the stubborn set of her jaw. This was a woman who had fought for every inch of this garden, every drop of water, every moment of survival. 2 years, she said. 2 years of digging wells, hauling water, mixing soil, testing what would grow and what would die. Lost more than I kept at first, but I am not the kind of person who quits. Cole found himself smiling, a rare expression that felt rusty on his face. "I can see that. Anyone this stubborn belongs here." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise maybe, or the beginning of pleasure at being understood rather than questioned. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "Yes, ma'am, it is." "This country does not suffer fools or the faint-hearted. You are neither." He pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Name is Cole Brennan. I have been working cattle drives between Texas and California, but I am looking to settle somewhere. Maybe start my own spread." "Elena Vasquez," she said, and offered her hand like a man would, straight out and firm. He shook it, feeling the roughness of hard work, the same kind of calluses he bore himself. "My father left me this land when he died. Everyone in town told me to sell it, that it was worthless, that no woman alone could make anything of it. I decided to prove them wrong." "Looks like you did." Cole glanced around at the homestead. Besides the garden and the small adobe house, there was a lean-to that served as a barn, a chicken coop from which he could hear the soft clucking of hens, and what appeared to be a root cellar dug into the side of a low hill. "You do all this yourself?" "Every bit of it," pride rang clear in her voice. "I traded vegetables in town for tools and seeds. Learned from the Tohono O'odham people, who know how to make the desert bloom. They showed me how to dig down to find water, how to use the land's own features to channel what little rain falls, how to plant in the shadows and make every drop count." Cole nodded slowly, impressed in a way he rarely was by anything or anyone. He had seen men break themselves trying to tame this land, had watched families pack up and leave after one bad season or one dry well. This woman alone had not just survived but created something beautiful and productive where nothing should exist. "You hungry?" Elena asked suddenly. "I have stew on the stove." "It is not much, just rabbit and vegetables, but you are welcome to share it if you have news from the wider world. It gets lonely out here, and I do not make it to town as often as I probably should." Cole's stomach growled in response, reminding him that he had been living on jerky and hardtack for days. "I would be grateful, Miss Vasquez, and I have plenty of news if you want to hear it." She led him toward the house, and he tied his horse in the shade of the lean to where it could rest. The interior of the adobe was surprisingly cool, the thick walls keeping out the worst of the heat. The single room was neat and spare, with a bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with jars of preserved food, and a cast-iron stove that radiated warmth despite the outside temperature. Herbs hung drying from the ceiling beams, filling the air with the scent of sage and rosemary. Elena ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and set them on the table along with thick slices of bread that she must have baked herself. Cole sat down and waited for her to seat herself before he picked up his spoon, his mother's long-ago lessons in manners surfacing unexpectedly. "So tell me," Elena said, tearing a piece of bread and using it to soak up the stew's rich broth. "What brings a cowboy through this particular stretch of nowhere?" Cole ate slowly, savoring the first home-cooked meal he had tasted in months. "I was working a drive that ended in Tucson. Got paid out and decided to head west, see what opportunities might be available in California. But the more I travel, the more I think about putting down roots. I am tired of living out of a bedroll, tired of eating dust and dodging stampedes. I am 28 years old, and I figure it is time to build something that lasts." "California is still a long way off," Elena observed. "What made you stop here?" "Your garden," he said simply. "When I saw it, I thought to myself, now there is someone who understands what it takes to make something from nothing. That is rare, worth stopping for." Elena looked at him over the rim of her bowl, those honey-colored eyes searching his face for something. "You are not like most cowboys I have met." "How is that?" "Most of them look at me like I am either a conquest or a curiosity. You look at me like I am a person who might have something interesting to say." She set down her spoon. "It is refreshing." They talked through the afternoon, the conversation flowing easier than Cole would have expected. He told her about the cattle drives, about the places he had seen from San Antonio to Abilene to Dodge City. He described the wild towns and the open ranges, the thunderstorms that could turn a herd into a panicked mass of horns and hooves, the quiet nights under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Elena, in turn, told him about her life. Her father had been a vaquero, one of the Mexican cowboys who had worked this land long before the Anglos arrived in force. He had saved enough money to buy this parcel, dreaming of leaving something to his children. But fever had taken Elena's mother and siblings when she was just 16, and her father had died 4 years later from a fall off a horse, leaving her alone with nothing but this unforgiving patch of desert and a stubborn refusal to give up on his dream. "The banker in town, Mr. Thornton, he keeps coming out here trying to buy the land," Elena said, her voice hardening. "Offers me money and tells me I should go live with relatives in Sonora, that this is no life for a woman alone. But I have no relatives left, and even if I did, this is my home. My father's blood and sweat are in this ground. I will not abandon it." "Good for you," Cole said, and meant it. "Man like that probably has his own reasons for wanting your land. Never trust a banker who suddenly acts concerned about your welfare." Elena laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face, softening the hard edges and revealing the beauty beneath. "You have met men like Mr. Thornton before, I see. Too many of them." Cole pushed back from the table, reluctant to leave but knowing he should not overstay his welcome. "I should get moving, let you get back to your work. Thank you for the meal and the company, Miss Vasquez. Both were better than I expected to find out here." Something like disappointment crossed her face, but she masked it quickly. "Where will you go now?" Cole honestly did not know. He had been heading west out of habit more than plan, following the sun because it was easier than stopping and deciding what he really wanted. But standing in this cool adobe house, having shared a meal with a woman who seemed to understand the value of hard work and persistence, he found his certainty about California wavering. "There is a town about 10 miles north of here, is that right?" he asked. "I passed the turnoff a few miles back." "Coyote Springs," Elena confirmed. "Not much of a town, really. A general store, a saloon, a church, and maybe 30 people on a good day. But they have a livery stable and a boarding house if you need a place to stay. Might head there, see if anyone is hiring." He settled his hat back on his head. "Thank you again, Miss Vasquez." "Elena," she said, "if you are going to compliment my stubborn nature, you might as well call me by my given name." He smiled. "Elena, then, and you can call me Cole." She walked him outside, and they stood in the lowering sun, the light turning everything gold and amber. His horse had rested and drunk its fill, and Cole knew he could make Coyote Springs before full dark if he left now. But he found himself hesitating, not quite ready to ride away from this unexpected oasis. "If you are in town more than a day or two," Elena said, "and if you find yourself bored, you are welcome to come back this way. I could use help digging a new irrigation channel, and I make a fair wage in vegetables if you are interested." It was not much of an invitation, carefully casual, but Cole heard the hope beneath it. She was lonely out here, and he was the first person in who knew how long who had looked at her accomplishments with respect instead of skepticism or pity. "I might just take you up on that," he said, swinging up into the saddle, "if I do not find anything better in town." "High praise," she said dryly, but she was smiling as she said it. Cole touched the brim of his hat in farewell and turned his horse north. He looked back once when he was about 100 yards away and saw her standing where he had left her, a solitary figure against the vast emptiness of the desert. Then he urged his horse into a trot and tried to focus on the road ahead instead of the strange pull he felt to turn back around. Coyote Springs lived up to Elena's description. It was barely more than a wide spot in the road, a handful of sun-bleached buildings clustered around a central square where a few scraggly cottonwood trees provided inadequate shade. Cole found the boarding house easily enough, a 2-story structure that looked like it had been built with more optimism than the town ultimately deserved. The proprietor, a widow named Mrs. Chen, who had come west with the railroad workers and stayed when her husband died, gave him a room for 50 cents a night and pointed him toward the saloon for supper. The saloon was called the Desert Rose, which Cole found amusing given that he had just left the only thing resembling a rose in this entire stretch of territory. Inside, it was dim and relatively cool, with a handful of men drinking at the bar and 2 old-timers playing cards in the corner. Cole ordered whiskey and a plate of whatever the kitchen was serving, then settled in to listen to the conversations around him. He learned that the local cattle ranchers were feuding over water rights, that the stage had been held up twice in the last month, and that everyone expected the summer to be even drier than usual. He also learned, from a loud conversation between the bartender and a portly man in a suit who could only be the banker Thornton, that there was considerable interest in the land around Coyote Springs from railroad speculators. "I am telling you, Jack," Thornton said, his voice carrying across the room, "if we can consolidate those parcels south of town, we can name our price when the railroad comes through. They will need the right-of-way and we will have them over a barrel." "What about the Vasquez woman?" the bartender asked. "She's still refusing to sell." Thornton's face darkened. "Stubborn as a mule, that one, but she cannot hold out forever. One bad season, one dry well, and she will come begging, then we will get that land for pennies on the dollar." Cole felt his jaw tighten, so that was the game. Thornton did not want Alina's land because he cared about her welfare. He wanted it because he knew something she did not, that the railroad was coming and her property stood in the way of his profit. He finished his whiskey and his meal, paid his tab, and headed back to the boarding house. But that night, lying in a narrow bed with questionable sheets, he could not stop thinking about Alina alone in her adobe house, fighting to keep land that powerful men wanted to take from her. It was none of his business. He had learned long ago not to get involved in other people's problems, that the safest course was to keep moving, to stay unattached and uninvolved. But when morning came, Cole found himself saddling his horse and riding south instead of west. He told himself he was just going to warn her about Thornton's plans, that it was the decent thing to do. But as the sun climbed higher and the familiar landmarks appeared, he admitted that decency was only part of it. He wanted to see her again, wanted to talk to her, wanted to understand how she had managed to create such beauty in such a harsh place. The garden looked even more impressive in the morning light, the plants heavy with dew that would burn off within the hour. Alina was already at work, this time digging at the far end of her property with a shovel that looked almost too big for her frame. She had not heard his approach, and Cole took a moment to watch her work, admiring the efficient economy of her movements, the way she drove the shovel deep and lifted the dirt with practiced ease. "You came back," she said without turning around, and he realized she had known he was there all along. "Came to warn you about something I heard in town," Cole said, dismounting and leading his horse to the trough, "and to take you up on that offer of work if it still stands." Alina stopped digging and turned to face him, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "What kind of warning?" He told her what he had overheard, about Thornton and the railroad and the plans to consolidate land. Alina listened without interrupting, her expression growing grimmer with each word. "So that is why he has been so persistent," she said when Cole finished. "It is not about my welfare at all, it is about making money off my father's dream." "That is about the size of it," Cole agreed. "I figured you should know what you are up against." "And you rode all the way back here to tell me." Alina's eyes searched his face. "You could have just kept riding to California." "I could have," Cole admitted, "but it did not sit right knowing what I knew and not sharing it. You deserve a fair fight at least." Alina stuck her shovel in the ground and walked over to him. "Thank you, not many people would have bothered." She was close enough now that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, the freckles that dusted her nose despite her best efforts to stay covered. So, you said something about that offer of work. If you still need the help. Always. She pulled the shovel free and handed it to him. I am trying to dig a channel that will carry runoff from that rise over there to this section of the garden. It is backbreaking work, and I will not lie to you about that. But I can pay you in meals and vegetables, and if you want to stay more than a day, you can sleep in the barn. It is not fancy, but it is better than some places. Cole took the shovel, his hand brushing hers in the exchange. Sounds fair to me. They worked through the morning, falling into an easy rhythm. Elena showed him where she wanted the channel to go, explaining her vision for how the water would flow, how it would feed into a small reservoir she planned to dig at the lower end. Cole listened and learned, impressed by the sophistication of her thinking. This was not just gardening. It was engineering, making the land work for her instead of against her. By midday, they had made significant progress, and Elena called a halt to get out of the worst of the sun. They sat in the shade of the adobe, passing a canteen of water back and forth, too tired to talk much but comfortable in the shared silence. Cole found himself noticing small things about her, the way she massaged her left shoulder where the shovel work had strained it, the stubborn curl that kept falling into her face no matter how many times she pushed it back, the quiet satisfaction in her eyes when she looked at what they had accomplished. You know, you did not have to come back, Elena said after a while. I am used to people not following through on vague promises. Was not a vague promise, Cole replied. When I say I might do something, I usually mean it. But you did not have to warn me about Thornton either. That was a kindness. She turned to look at him directly. Why did you really come back, Cole? It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. Cole thought about it, trying to find the right words. I have been drifting for a long time, he said finally. Ever since my parents died and the home place got sold off to pay debts. I have been working other men's cattle, sleeping under other men's roofs, living without any stake in the outcome. It gets old after a while, not mattering, not building anything that lasts. He gestured at the garden, at the house, at everything she had created. You are building something here, something real. I guess I wanted to be part of that, even if just for a little while. Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Cole worried that he had said too much, revealed too much. But then she nodded slowly. I understand that, the need to matter, to leave a mark. That is why I cannot sell this land, even when it would be easier. My father mattered, and this place is proof of that. If I let it go, it is like saying his life did not count for anything. It counted, Cole said firmly. He raised a daughter stubborn enough to make a garden grow in the driest dirt in the territory. That is one hell of a legacy. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. Anyone this stubborn belongs here, that is what you said yesterday. I meant it then too. They went back to work as the afternoon began to cool, and by evening, the irrigation channel was half dug. Cole's back ached, and his hands were blistered despite years of hard labor, but he felt satisfied in a way he had not felt in longer than he could remember. This was work that meant something, that would still be here tomorrow and the day after, making life better for someone who deserved it. Elena made supper, another simple meal of beans and cornbread, but it tasted better than anything Cole had eaten in months. They ate outside as the sun set, watching the sky turn from blue to purple to deep indigo, the stars emerging one by one like sparks from a celestial fire. You can take the barn like I said, Elena told him when the last light faded. There are blankets in the chest inside and the hay is clean. I just brought in a new load last week. I appreciate it. Cole stood and stretched, his muscles already stiffening. I will get started early tomorrow if that is all right with you. Dawn is when I usually start, Elena said. But take your time, you are a guest, not a hired hand, Cole smiled. I thought I was a hired hand, working for meals and vegetables, you said. You are more than that already, Elena said quietly. and then she disappeared into the house before he could respond. The barn was small but well-maintained, with clean straw and solid walls that would keep out the worst of the weather. Cole spread out his bedroll, removed his boots, and lay back, staring up at the dark rafters. He could hear the soft sounds of the desert night, coyotes calling in the distance, the rustle of small creatures, the whisper of wind through the garden. He should leave in the morning. He should thank Alina for her hospitality, wish her well, and continue on to California where opportunity supposedly waited. That would be the sensible thing, the safe thing. But Cole found he did not want to be sensible or safe. For the first time in years, he wanted to stay somewhere, to commit to something, to see what might grow if he gave it time and care. The next morning, Cole woke to the sound of Alina already at work in the garden. He pulled on his boots, splashed water on his face from the trough, and joined her as the sun painted the eastern sky orange and pink. They fell into a pattern over the next week. They worked through the cool morning hours, rested during the brutal midday heat, and resumed in the evening until darkness made it impossible to see. The irrigation channel took shape, then the reservoir, then a series of smaller channels that would carry water to the parts of the garden that needed it most. Cole learned how Alina had positioned each plant to maximize shade and minimize water loss, how she had mixed the local clay soil with compost and sand to create a growing medium that could sustain life. He also learned about her, the small details that emerged through days of working side by side. She loved mathematics and had taught herself from books her father brought home. She could read and write in both Spanish and English. She had a beautiful singing voice that emerged when she thought he was not listening. She was stubborn, yes, but also generous, funny, and fiercely intelligent. And Cole found himself falling in love with her, though he tried to fight it. Love was a complication he did not need, especially with a woman who was rooted to a place while he had spent years as a wanderer. But the heart did not listen to logic, and with each passing day, he found it harder to imagine leaving. Alina, for her part, seemed to be wrestling with her own feelings. Cole caught her watching him sometimes when she thought he was focused on his work, her expression unguarded and yearning. But whenever he met her eyes, she would look away, busying herself with some task, retreating behind the walls she had built to protect herself. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when riders appeared on the horizon. There were 5 of them, and they were not traveling the main road but cutting directly across the open desert toward Alina's property. Cole straightened from the post he was setting, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun belt he wore. "You expecting company?" He asked Alina, who had also stopped working to watch the approaching riders. "No," she said, and there was worry in her voice. "I never expect company out here." The riders resolved into distinct figures as they drew closer. 4 were ranch hands by the look of them, dressed in working clothes with guns on their hips. The 5th man, riding slightly ahead, was Thornton the banker, his suit looking absurdly formal in the harsh landscape. They reined in their horses at the edge of the garden, and Thornton dismounted with the air of a man who owned everything he surveyed. The ranch hands stayed mounted, their presence clearly meant as intimidation. "Miss Vasquez," Thornton said, touching the brim of his hat in a parody of courtesy. "I apologize for the unannounced visit, but I have been trying to speak with you for some time now, and you have been avoiding town." "I have been busy," Alina said coolly. "As you can see, I have work to do. If you have business with me, state it and be on your way." Thornton's smile did not reach his eyes. "Always direct, aren't you? Very well. I am here to make you one final offer for your land. $500, cash money, more than this worthless dirt is worth. Take it, and you can start a new life somewhere more suitable for a woman alone. I told you before, Mr. Thornton, and I will tell you again, this land is not for sale." Alina crossed her arms, her stance defiant. "Now please leave my property." "I am afraid I cannot do that," Thornton said, his voice hardening. "You see, I have done some research into your title, and there appears to be some irregularities. Questions about whether your father actually completed the requirements for his claim. I have friends in the Territorial Land Office, and they have agreed to review the matter. It would be a shame if you lost this land for nothing when you could have taken my generous offer." Cole stepped forward, putting himself between Alina and Thornton. "The lady said no. That means the conversation is over." Thornton's eyes flicked to Cole, really seeing him for the first time. "And who might you be?" "Someone who does not like seeing women bullied on their own land." "This is not your concern, Cowboy." Thornton's voice took on a sharp edge. "I am conducting legal business with Miss Vasquez." "Does not sound legal to me," Cole said. "Sounds like you are threatening to use corrupt officials to steal land that does not belong to you." "That is called fraud where I come from, and it is the kind of thing that gets men run out of town." One of the ranch hands shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun. Cole noticed the movement and adjusted his own stance, his body loose and ready. He had been in situations like this before, had learned to read the moment when words stopped and violence began. "I would think real careful before you do something stupid," Cole said to the ranch hand, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "Because I am faster than I look, and I have no problem defending this lady's property." Tension stretched thin between them, the moment balanced on a knife edge. Then Thornton held up a hand, stopping the ranch hand before things escalated. "There is no need for violence," Thornton said, though his eyes promised that this was not over. "I am a reasonable man, Miss Vasquez, but my patience has limits. I will give you 2 weeks to reconsider. After that, I will have no choice but to pursue the legal irregularities I mentioned." "Good day." He remounted and turned his horse around, his men following. They rode away at a leisurely pace, making it clear they were leaving by choice, not because they were intimidated. Cole watched until they were distant specks before he allowed himself to relax. "Thank you," Alina said quietly. "I have dealt with Thornton before, but he has never been that aggressive." "He is getting desperate." "Which makes him dangerous," Cole said. "Men like that, when they think they are running out of options, they stop playing by rules. We need to figure out what he meant about irregularities in your title." "My father filed his claim legally," Alina insisted, but doubt had crept into her voice. "He showed me the papers, the proof that he had met all the requirements. They should be in the county records." "Should be is not the same as are," Cole said grimly. "If Thornton has friends in the land office, papers can disappear. We need to make sure your claim is solid before he makes his next move." Alina sank down onto the ground, suddenly looking exhausted. "I cannot fight the whole territorial government. If Thornton has the kind of connections he claims, I have already lost." Cole sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You have not lost anything yet, and you are not alone in this fight anymore. We will go to the land office, verify your claim, make sure everything is documented properly. And if Thornton has tampered with anything, we will find proof and expose him." "Why are you doing this?" Alina turned to look at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You do not owe me anything. You could just leave, go to California like you planned." Cole reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses and the strength, the evidence of her stubborn determination to build a life on her own terms. "Because I am tired of drifting. Tired of not mattering, and because you matter to me more than I probably should admit after only knowing you a week." He took a breath, making himself vulnerable in a way he had avoided for years. "I am falling in love with you, Alina. With your stubbornness and your strength and the way you make gardens grow where nothing should live, so I am not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to go." The tears spilled over then, tracking down her dusty cheeks, but she was smiling through them, her hand tightening around his. "I am falling in love with you too. I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself from getting hurt when you inevitably left. But you keep not leaving, and you keep looking at me like I am worth something, and I cannot help it." Cole pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, pressing her face against his shoulder. He held her while she cried, releasing the fear and loneliness and strain of fighting alone for so long. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Anyone this stubborn belongs here," she said, echoing his words from that first day. "Do you really believe that?" "With all my heart." She kissed him then, a kiss that tasted of salt and hope and the promise of something neither of them had expected to find. Cole returned it, pouring 2 years of loneliness and longing into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. "We should go to the land office," Alina said eventually, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "The sooner we secure my claim, the better." "Agreed. But first, we are going to make copies of any documentation you have. And we are going to find witnesses who can testify to your father's residency and improvements to the land. Thornton is playing a game, but we can play it better." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Alina found the papers her father had kept, documents proving his purchase of the land and his filing of the claim. Cole went through them carefully, making notes of dates and signatures. Then they rode to the nearest neighbor, a grizzled rancher named McAllister who lived 5 miles east. McAllister remembered Alina's father well and was happy to swear out an affidavit confirming that the man had lived on the land, improved it, and met all the requirements for claiming it. "That Thornton is a snake," McAllister growled, signing his name with a shaky hand. "Always trying to steal what honest folks have worked for. You tell him if he gives you trouble, he will have to answer to me." They collected similar statements from 2 other families who lived in the area, building a case that would be hard to dispute. By the time they returned to Alina's homestead, it was well past dark, but both of them felt more hopeful than they had that morning. "We will ride to the territorial capital tomorrow," Cole said as they unsaddled their horses. "It is a long trip, probably 3 days each way, but we need to file these affidavits and make sure your claim is registered properly." "Both of us?" Alina asked. "You do not have to come with me, Cole. This is my fight." "Not anymore," he said firmly. "We are in this together now. Besides, you should not travel that distance alone. It is not safe." Alina smiled, and even in the darkness, he could see the warmth in her expression. "Together, then. But we need to leave someone in charge of the garden and the animals. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house, she has a nephew who needs work. Maybe he would be willing to stay here for a week or so." They made arrangements the next morning, hiring the nephew, a responsible young man named Tommy who was happy for the employment. Alina showed him what needed to be done, explaining the watering schedule and the care of the chickens. Then she and Cole packed supplies for the journey and set out east toward the territorial capital. The trip gave them time to talk, really talk, about their pasts and their hopes for the future. Cole told Alina about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 19, about the years of wandering that followed. Alina shared memories of her family, the laughter and love that had filled their home before sickness took it all away, the crushing loneliness of the years that followed. "Sometimes I talk to my father when I am working in the garden," Alina admitted as they made camp on the second night. "I tell him what I am planting, what is growing well. I know he cannot hear me, but it makes me feel less alone." "Maybe he can hear you," Cole said. "Who is to say what the dead know or do not know?" They reached the capital on the 3rd day, a growing town that served as the hub of territorial government. The land office was housed in a sturdy stone building, and the clerk who met them was a thin, nervous man who kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone to burst through it. "I need to verify my land claim," Alina said, laying out her paperwork. "And I want to file these affidavits confirming that all requirements were met." The clerk looked over the documents, his frown deepening. "This claim is under review," he said. "I cannot accept any additional filings until the review is complete." Review. Alina's voice sharpened. "By whose authority?" "By order of Mr. Thornton, who has raised questions about the legitimacy of the original filing." The clerk would not meet her eyes. "I am sorry, miss, but my hands are tied." Cole leaned forward, his presence suddenly menacing despite his calm tone. "Let me make sure I understand. A private citizen has managed to freeze a legitimate land claim without any judicial review, without giving the claimant a chance to respond, and you see nothing wrong with that." The clerk swallowed hard. "Those are my orders." "From whom?" Cole pressed. "Who in this office has the authority to freeze a claim on the word of one man?" Before the clerk could answer, a door at the back of the office opened and an older man emerged, his face weathered and his eyes sharp. "I am the Territorial Land Commissioner," he said. "And I gave the order to review the Vasquez claim. Now, who the hell are you to come in here making accusations?" Cole straightened but did not back down. "I am someone who has seen how corruption works, and I am smelling a lot of it right now. This woman has a legal claim to land she has improved and lived on for years. If there are questions about the claim, she has a right to answer them before any action is taken." The commissioner studied Cole for a long moment, then turned his attention to Alina. "You are Isabella Vasquez's daughter?" "Alina Vasquez, yes. My father was Antonio Vasquez." She met his gaze steadily. "He bought that land legally and filed his claim properly." "I have the paperwork to prove it." "May I see it?" Alina handed over the documents, and the commissioner examined them carefully, taking his time. Cole watched the man's face, trying to read what he was thinking. Finally, the commissioner looked up. "These appear to be in order," he said. "The claim was filed on time, the improvements were documented, and the residency requirements were met. I see no irregularities." "Then why is the claim under review?" Alina demanded. The commissioner sighed. "Because Mr. Thornton has friends in high places, and he has put pressure on this office to delay your claim. He wants your land, and he is willing to use his influence to get it." He handed the paperwork back to Alina. "But I am not as corrupt as he seems to think. Your claim is legitimate, and I will not allow it to be stolen through bureaucratic manipulation." Relief flooded through Cole, but he kept his voice level. "So the review is lifted." "The review is lifted," the commissioner confirmed. "And I will personally ensure that all the proper documentation is filed and recorded. Miss Vasquez, your land is secure, at least as far as the territorial government is concerned." Alina's hands shook as she took back her papers. Thank you so much." "Do not thank me for doing my job," the commissioner said, but his tone was kind. "Just be careful. Thornton is not the kind of man who accepts defeat gracefully. He will try something else." They left the land office with Alina's claim officially secured, but Cole could not shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. The commissioner was right. Men like Thornton did not give up just because the legal avenue failed. They found other ways to get what they wanted. The journey back to Coyote Springs took another 3 days, and they arrived to find everything in good order. Tommy had done his job well, keeping the garden watered and the animals fed. Alina paid him generously and thanked him, then stood looking at her land with visible relief. "It is still mine," she said quietly. "I did not realize how much fear I was carrying until it lifted." Cole put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "It is still yours, and it always will be. We made sure of that." They settled back into their routine, but there was a new ease between them now. a comfort born of shared struggle and declared feelings. Cole no longer slept in the barn. Alina invited him into the house, into her bed, and they spent the nights learning each other in the darkness, finding joy and passion and tenderness. 2 weeks passed peacefully. The garden flourished under their combined care, producing more vegetables than Alina had ever managed alone. They talked about expanding, about planting an orchard, about maybe raising a few cattle or horses. They talked about the future as if it was something they would share, a given rather than a hope. Then Thornton made his next move. Cole was in the garden early one morning when he smelled smoke. He looked up to see flames rising from the direction of McAllister's ranch, black smoke billowing into the pale sky. Without thinking, he ran for the horses, yelling for Alina. "Fire at McAllister's," he shouted as she emerged from the house. "We have to help." They rode hard, arriving to find the barn fully engulfed and spreading toward the house. McAllister and his wife were trying desperately to save their belongings, hauling furniture and trunks out while the flames crept closer. Cole and Alina joined in, working frantically to move anything salvageable away from the fire. Other neighbors arrived, forming a bucket brigade from the well, but it was too late to save the barn and too little water to make much difference. By the time the fire burned itself out, McAllister had lost his barn, his equipment, and half his livestock. The old rancher stood staring at the smoking ruins, his face gray with shock and despair. "How did it start?" Cole asked gently. "I do not know," McAllister said. "I was in the house having breakfast when my wife smelled smoke. By the time we got out here, the barn was already burning." Cole walked around the perimeter of the destruction, looking for clues. He found them near the back of what had been the barn, where the fire had burned hottest. Broken glass from a whiskey bottle, the kind used for making torches. Hoofprints in the soft dirt, several horses heading north toward Coyote Springs. "This was not an accident," Cole said, his voice tight with anger. "Someone set this fire deliberately." McAllister closed his eyes. "Thornton, it has to be Thornton." "I signed that affidavit for Alina. He is sending a message." Alina had gone pale, her hand pressed to her mouth. "This is my fault. If I had just sold the land like he wanted, none of this would have happened." "This is not your fault," Cole said fiercely. "This is Thornton's fault, and he is going to answer for it." "Where can I find the law around here? A sheriff or a marshal?" "Nearest law is in Tucson, 50 miles south," McAllister said. "And even if you could get them here, proving Thornton was behind this would be next to impossible. He is too smart to do his own dirty work." Cole thought fast. They needed evidence, something that would tie Thornton directly to the arson. And they needed protection, because if Thornton was willing to burn out McAllister as a warning, he would not stop there. "I am going into Coyote Springs," Cole said. "I am going to talk to some people, see what I can learn. Alina, you should stay with the McAllisters today, help them start cleaning up. I will be back before dark." "Be careful," Alina said, catching his hand. "Thornton is more dangerous than we realized." "I know, but so am I when someone I love is threatened." He rode into Coyote Springs with his anger held in check, but burning just beneath the surface. His first stop was the saloon, where the bartender was just opening up for the day. "Whiskey," Cole said, laying a coin on the bar. "And information." The bartender, Jack, poured the drink and eyed Cole warily. "What kind of information?" "The kind about who might have been riding out toward McAllister's place before dawn this morning. 4 or 5 men headed back this way a couple hours ago." Jack's face closed down. "I do not know anything about that." Cole leaned forward. "McAllister's barn burned down this morning. Arson. Someone used a whiskey bottle to start it, the same kind of bottle you serve here." "I serve a lot of people," Jack said defensively. "Does not mean anything." "It means someone is going to hang for burning out an old man who never hurt anyone," Cole said quietly. And if I find out you knew something and did not speak up, you are going to be right there beside them on the gallows." Jack swallowed hard, glancing toward the back room. "Look, I am just trying to make a living here. I do not want trouble." "Then help me make sure the right people face the consequences for what they have done." The bartender wavered, then sighed. "4 of Thornton's men were in here last night. They bought 2 bottles of whiskey and left around midnight. They looked like they were up to something, but I did not ask questions." "That is how you stay alive in a town like this, by not asking questions. You got names for these men: Carson, Briggs, Mullins, and Dutch. They work for Thornton's ranching operation, or at least that is what he calls it. Mostly they do whatever dirty work he needs done." Cole memorized the names. "Where can I find them now?" "Probably at Thornton's place, 5 miles west of town. Big house, can't miss it." Jack hesitated. "Look, Cowboy, whatever you are planning, be smart about it. Thornton has money and guns, and he is not afraid to use both." "Neither am I," Cole said and left. He did not ride straight to Thornton's place. Instead, he circled around, approaching from the south where he could observe without being seen. Thornton's house was indeed impressive, a 2-story ranch house with a wide porch and several outbuildings. Cole counted at least 8 men working around the property, all armed. Confronting Thornton directly would be suicide. Cole needed a different approach, something that would force the banker to back down without getting Alina or her friends killed in the process. He thought about it as he rode back toward McAllister's place, turning the problem over in his mind. By the time he arrived, he had the beginnings of a plan. It was risky, but everything about this situation was risky. The only question was whether Alina would agree to it. He found her helping Mrs. McAllister sort through smoke-damaged clothing, trying to salvage what could be saved. She looked up when he approached, her eyes questioning. "We need to talk," Cole said quietly. "Alone." They walked away from the house, out into the scrubland where no one could overhear. Cole told her what he had learned about Thornton's men and the whiskey bottles, about the small army the banker kept on his payroll. "So what do we do?" Alina asked. "We cannot fight him with guns." "He has too many men." "No, but we can fight him with information." Cole took her hands. "Thornton is powerful in Coyote Springs because people are afraid of him, and because he has kept his crimes hidden. But if we expose him, if we bring in outside law and make sure everyone knows what he has done, his power disappears. He becomes just another criminal facing justice. How do we expose him?" "You said yourself we have no proof he ordered the arson." "We get him to confess," Cole said, "or at least to say enough that witnesses can testify to his intent. And we make sure those witnesses include people he cannot intimidate or bribe." Alina's eyes widened as she understood what he was proposing. "You want to set a trap for him." "Exactly. We make him think he is winning, that you are ready to sell. We arrange a meeting in town, in the saloon or somewhere public, where multiple people can hear what he says. And we get him talking about why he wants your land so badly, about the railroad, about the other things he has done to force you out. He is not stupid, Cole. He will know it is a trap. Maybe. But he is also arrogant, and he has been winning for so long that he probably thinks he is untouchable. We use that against him." Cole paused. "There is something else. I want to send a telegram to the territorial marshal in Tucson. Tell him what has been happening up here. Even if we do not get a full confession from Thornton, having an outside lawman investigating will put pressure on him." Alina thought about it, worrying her lower lip with her teeth. "It could work," she said finally, "but it is dangerous. If Thornton realizes what we are doing before we can get the marshal here, he might do something worse than burning a barn." "I know. That is why we have to be smart about it, careful about the timing." Cole pulled her close. "I will not let him hurt you, Alina. Whatever happens, I will keep you safe." "I am not worried about me," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. I am worried about you. You are the one planning to walk into the lion's den. I have been in tight spots before. I always come out the other side. They spent the rest of the day finalizing their plan. Cole rode to the nearest telegraph office, 20 miles south, and sent a carefully worded message to the territorial marshal explaining the situation and requesting assistance. The marshal's response came back within 2 hours, promising that he would arrive in Coyote Springs within 3 days with deputies. That gave them a timeline. They needed to arrange the meeting with Thornton for 3 days out, giving the marshal time to arrive, but not so much time that Thornton could make another move against them. Alina volunteered to be the one to approach Thornton. "He will believe it more if I am the one who seems to be giving up," she said. "I will go into town tomorrow, tell him I am ready to discuss his offer. I will insist the meeting be in the saloon in front of witnesses because I want to make sure I get a fair price. He will think I am just being cautious about the business side of things." Cole hated the idea of Alina anywhere near Thornton, but he had to admit her logic was sound. "I will be there," he said. "I will be watching the whole time, and if anything goes wrong, if he tries anything, I will stop him." The next day, Alina rode into Coyote Springs dressed in her best clothes, her hair neatly pinned, looking for all the world like a woman who had finally accepted the inevitable. She found Thornton at the bank, and Cole watched from across the street as she went inside. The conversation lasted 15 minutes. When Alina emerged, she gave Cole a small nod before mounting her horse and riding out of town. Cole waited another hour before following, making sure no one connected the two of them. Back at the homestead, Alina reported on the meeting. "He was so smug," she said, her voice tight with anger. "So sure he had won. He agreed to meet at the saloon in 3 days, said he would bring the cash and the paperwork. He even said he was glad I had finally come to my senses." "Did he say anything about why he wants the land?" "No, he was careful about that, but I could see it in his eyes. He thinks he has gotten away with everything, that burning out McAllister was the final push I needed to give up." Alina's hands clenched into fists. "I want him to pay for what he has done. Not just to me, but to McAllister and everyone else he has hurt. He will," Cole promised. 3 more days and this will be over." Those 3 days felt like 3 weeks. They went through the motions of daily life, tending the garden and caring for the animals, but the tension stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Cole checked and rechecked his guns, making sure they were clean and loaded. Alina practiced what she would say to Thornton, how she would draw him out without making him suspicious. On the morning of the meeting, a stranger rode into the homestead. He was a tall man with a star on his vest and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. "Looking for Cole Brennan and Alina Vasquez," he said. "You found them," Cole replied, stepping forward. "You are the territorial marshal, Deputy Marshal Samuel Grant. The marshal sent me ahead to assess the situation. He is following with 3 more deputies, should be here by nightfall." Grant dismounted and accepted the water Alina offered. "Tell me everything." They spent an hour briefing Grant on Thornton's actions, on the arson at McAllister's place, on the planned meeting at the saloon. Grant listened carefully, asking pointed questions, his expression growing grimmer. "You are right that we need a confession or at least some statements that tie him to the crimes," Grant said. "I will be in the saloon when you meet with Thornton, but I will be undercover. Just another drifter passing through. I will hear everything that is said, and my testimony will carry weight in court." "What about Thornton's men?" Cole asked. "He is likely to bring some of them." "Let him. The more witnesses to whatever he says, the better. Just keep him talking, get him comfortable. Men like Thornton love to brag when they think they are on top." That afternoon, Alina and Cole rode into Coyote Springs together. They arrived at the saloon an hour before the scheduled meeting, giving Grant time to position himself. The deputy marshal was already at the bar when they walked in, looking like any other cowboy with trail dust on his clothes and weariness in his eyes. Jack the bartender looked nervous when he saw Cole, but he served them drinks without comment. A few other townspeople were scattered around the room, including the owner of the general store and the blacksmith. Cole had made sure to spread the word that Alina was meeting with Thornton to discuss selling her land, figuring the more witnesses, the safer Alina would be. Thornton arrived exactly on time, accompanied by 3 of his men. Cole recognized 2 of them from Jack's description, Carson and Briggs, the men who had likely set fire to McAllister's barn. They took up positions near the door while Thornton approached the table where Alina sat. "Miss Vasquez," Thornton said, all false warmth and oily charm. "I am so pleased you have decided to be reasonable about this matter. I have the papers right here and the cash as promised. $500, all yours once you sign." Alina looked at the papers but did not reach for them. "Before I sign anything, I want to understand something. Why is my land so valuable to you? It is just a small parcel in the middle of nowhere." "Why have you been so determined to get it?" Thornton's smile slipped slightly. "Does it matter? I am offering you good money for a difficult property." "It matters to me," Alina said. "My father died for this land. If I am going to let it go, I want to know why." Cole could see Thornton calculating, trying to decide how much to reveal. The banker's eyes flicked around the room, noting the other people present, measuring whether they mattered. Apparently, he decided they did not because his smile returned, smug and self-satisfied. "Since we are about to do business together, I suppose there is no harm in telling you," Thornton said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from Alina. "The railroad is coming through this area within the year. They have been surveying the route, and your property sits right in the path of the most direct line from Tucson to California. When they come looking to buy right-of-way, I want to be the one selling it to them, at a significant markup, of course." "Of course," Alina said dryly. "And the other properties you have been trying to acquire, they are all along this same route. Naturally. I am a businessman, Miss Vasquez. I see opportunities and I capitalize on them." Thornton spread his hands. "There is nothing illegal about that." "What about burning out McAllister?" Cole asked, speaking for the first time. "Is that just business too?" Thornton's expression hardened. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "Sure you do. Your men Carson and Briggs set fire to his barn 3 nights ago. They used whiskey bottles from this saloon to make torches." Cole stood up, his hand resting on the butt of his gun. "You wanted to send a message to Alina to make her think that refusing to sell had consequences. Only problem is, arson is a crime and you are going to answer for it." The room had gone silent, everyone watching the confrontation. Thornton's men moved away from the door, their hands dropping to their weapons. But before anyone could draw, Deputy Marshal Grant stood up from the bar, his badge now visible. "Nobody move," Grant said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I am Deputy Marshal Samuel Grant, and I have heard enough to arrest Mr. Thornton on charges of conspiracy to commit arson and attempted land fraud. Thornton, you and your men are going to come with me peacefully, or we can do this the hard way." Thornton had gone white, his eyes darting between Grant and the door. "You have no proof of anything." "This is entrapment. I have your confession, made in front of a dozen witnesses, that you knew about the railroad route and were trying to force Miss Vasquez off her land to profit from it. I have testimony from the bartender that your men bought the whiskey used in the arson attack. And I have the word of a territorial land commissioner that you tried to use corrupt officials to steal a legitimate claim." Grant moved forward, his hand on his gun. "Now, are you going to come quietly?" For a moment, Cole thought Thornton might be stupid enough to fight. The banker's face was twisted with rage and humiliation, and his men looked ready to back whatever play he made. But then the saloon door opened, and 3 more men wearing marshal badges entered, their rifles held ready. The fight went out of Thornton like air from a punctured bladder. His shoulders slumped, and he nodded slowly. "I will come." Grant and his deputies took Thornton and his men into custody, leading them out of the saloon toward the small jail at the edge of town. The other witnesses began talking all at once, excited and relieved that someone had finally stood up to the banker's corruption. Alina sat very still, her hands folded on the table, and Cole could see them shaking with released tension. He put his hand over hers, squeezing gently. "It is over," he said quietly. "You are safe now, your land is safe." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears. "We did it, we actually did it." "You did it," Cole corrected. "You refused to give up, refused to let him win. I just helped a little." They stayed in town long enough to give formal statements to Marshal Grant, detailing everything that had happened. Grant promised that Thornton would face trial and that the other properties the banker had acquired through intimidation and fraud would be investigated. "You both did good work here," Grant said as the sun began to set. "It takes courage to stand up to men like Thornton, especially when they have money and power on their side. The territory needs more people like you." Cole and Alina rode back to the homestead in the gathering darkness, both of them quiet and exhausted. But when they arrived and stood looking at the garden, at the small adobe house, at everything Alina had built, a sense of peace settled over them. "So what now?" Alina asked. "You got me through the fight, helped me keep my land. You are free to go to California if you want. I would understand." Cole turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I told you before I am not going anywhere. I found what I was looking for right here. A place to belong, a reason to stay. You are sure, because this is not an easy life. The land is hard, the climate is harsh, and there will always be another challenge around the corner." "I am sure," Cole said firmly. "I have been running from hard things my whole life, looking for something easier, something that did not require so much of me. But easy is not the same as meaningful. You taught me that. This garden growing in the driest dirt, that is meaningful. Your stubborn determination to build a life on your own terms, that is meaningful. And what I feel for you, that is the most meaningful thing of all." Alina smiled through her tears. "Anyone this stubborn belongs here, is that still true? More than ever." Cole kissed her softly, tasting salt and joy. "Marry me, Alina. Let me spend the rest of my life helping you make this garden grow, raising a family, building something that lasts." "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Coyote Springs. McAllister gave Alina away, his barn rebuilt with help from Cole and other neighbors. Mrs. Chen made the wedding cake, and it seemed like everyone in the territory showed up to celebrate the couple who had stood up to corruption and won. Deputy Marshal Grant attended, bringing news that Thornton had been sentenced to 10 years in prison for arson, fraud, and attempted theft of federal land claims. The banker's ill-gotten properties had been returned to their rightful owners, and a new, honest bank manager had been appointed in Coyote Springs. As Cole and Alina stood before the minister, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever challenges came, Cole thought about the path that had brought him here. All those years of drifting, of not belonging anywhere, had led him to a garden growing in impossible dirt, to a woman stubborn enough to make life bloom where it should not exist. He had ridden into the desert looking for nothing in particular and found everything that mattered. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and quiet joy. They expanded the garden, adding more trees and building a proper irrigation system that could serve the whole property. Cole built a larger barn and bought breeding stock, a few cattle and horses that could form the foundation of a real ranching operation. Alina continued to trade vegetables with the neighboring homesteads and in town, building a reputation for quality produce that drew customers from miles around. In the evenings, they sat on the porch Cole had built onto the front of the adobe house, watching the sun set over their land, planning for the future. They talked about children, about eventually building a bigger house, about maybe helping other settlers get established in the area. "You know what I think," Alina said one evening, her head resting on Cole's shoulder. "I think my father brought you here. I think he knew I could not do this alone forever, that I needed someone as stubborn as me to build a life with. So he sent you riding through at exactly the right moment." "You think your father controls the universe," Cole teased gently. "I think he loved me enough to make sure I did not end up alone, even after he was gone." Alina turned to look up at Cole. "And I think he would have liked you. You are exactly the kind of man he hoped I would find, strong, honest, willing to fight for what matters." "I hope I can live up to that," Cole said seriously. "Because he raised an incredible woman, and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how much I admire and love her." Alina's pregnancy was discovered in the spring of their second year together. She was sick for a few weeks, unable to keep food down, and they worried until the local midwife confirmed what Alina had already begun to suspect. A baby was coming, due in late autumn when the worst of the summer heat had passed. Cole was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. He had never really thought about being a father, had assumed that wandering existence would be his whole life. But now, faced with the reality of a child on the way, he threw himself into preparing with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He finished the addition to the house, creating a second room that could serve as a nursery. He built a cradle from mesquite wood, sanding it until it was smooth as glass. He read every book on childbirth and infant care that Mrs. Chen could find, determined to be ready for whatever came. Alina watched his frantic preparations with amusement and love. "You do know that babies mostly just eat, sleep, and cry for the first few months, right? We do not need to have everything perfect." "I want our child to have the best start possible," Cole said, not looking up from the cradle he was oiling. "I want him or her to know from the first moment that they are loved, wanted, protected." "They will know," Alina said gently, coming to stand beside him. "Because they will have you for a father, that alone will be enough." Their son was born on a clear October evening when the air had finally cooled, and the first hint of winter touched the desert. The midwife arrived in time to help, and Cole stayed with Alina through the whole ordeal, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her she was the strongest, bravest person he had ever known. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Cole felt something break open in his chest, a rush of feeling so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. This tiny, perfect human was his son, his and Alina's, a new life they had created together. "What should we call him?" Alina asked, exhausted but glowing as she held the baby against her chest. Cole thought about it, thought about all the people who had brought them to this moment. "Antonio," he said finally, "after your father, he brought us together in a way it seems right to honor him." Alina's eyes filled with tears. "Antonio Brennan, it is perfect." Antonio was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes. He grew quickly, and as he did, Cole and Alina marveled at every milestone, every smile, every moment of discovery. The homestead rang with the sounds of a child's laughter, a sound neither of them had heard in their home for far too long. As Antonio grew, Cole taught him about the land, about how to read the signs of weather and water, about the delicate balance required to make life flourish in such harsh conditions. Alina taught him about plants and growing things, about patience and persistence, about finding beauty in unlikely places. The years passed, each one building on the last. The ranch prospered, the garden expanded, and their love deepened with shared experiences and challenges overcome. They added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Isabel and another son they called James, and the small adobe house could barely contain the noise and energy of 3 active children. So Cole built them a real house, a proper 2-story home with room for everyone and windows that caught the breeze. They kept the original adobe, turning it into a guest house for visitors, and a quiet retreat when the noise of family life became overwhelming. Antonio grew into a strong, responsible young man who loved the land as much as his parents did. He took over more and more of the daily operations of the ranch, freeing Cole to focus on breeding their horses and cattle into bloodlines that could command premium prices. Isabel inherited her mother's gift for growing things, and her father's head for business, turning the garden into a thriving commercial operation that supplied produce to towns 50 miles in any direction. James, the youngest, was the dreamer of the family, always reading, always asking questions, eventually going off to study law with the goal of coming back and helping families like his own protect their land and rights. Cole and Alina watched their children grow and thrive with satisfaction and pride. They had built something real, something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. But they were not gone yet, not by a long shot. Even as their hair grayed and their bodies slowed, they still worked the land they loved, still tended the garden that had started it all, still found time to sit on their porch in the evenings and watch the sun set over the life they had built together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden past that day? Alina asked one evening, her hand in Cole's as they sat in their customary spot. They were both in their 60s now, weathered by decades of sun and work, but still healthy, still strong where it mattered. I think about it sometimes, Cole admitted. But I always come to the same conclusion. I would not have found what I was looking for. I would have kept drifting, kept searching, and never realized that what I needed was right here all along. A garden in the driest dirt, Alina said softly, and the most stubborn woman in the territory. Cole smiled at her, the same smile that had warmed her heart more than 30 years ago. You know what I said that first day? Anyone this stubborn belongs here. I was talking about you, but I was also talking about myself. We both belonged here in this hard, beautiful country, making something from nothing. We did make something, did not we? Alina looked out over their land, at the garden still producing after all these years, at the orchards heavy with fruit, at the cattle grazing in the distance, at the house filled with their children and now their grandchildren. Your father would be proud. Our fathers, Cole corrected, both of them. They set us on paths that led here, and we honored them by not giving up, by fighting for what mattered. Alina squeezed his hand. I love you, Cole Brennan. I have loved you since the day you looked at my impossible garden and saw possibility instead of folly. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Alina Vasquez Brennan. You taught me what it means to belong somewhere, to commit to something bigger than myself. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything. They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, mapping the sky above their land. The desert night wrapped around them, cool and peaceful, and somewhere in the house, they could hear their grandchildren laughing, the next generation already learning what it meant to make gardens grow in the driest dirt. Cole thought back to that day 30-some years ago when he had been a drifter with no destination, no purpose, no hope of finding anything more than another job, another town, another empty horizon. He thought about seeing Alina's garden for the first time, that impossible splash of green against the brown desolation, and knowing with sudden certainty that he had found something worth stopping for. He had been right, more right than he could have imagined in that moment, because Alina had not just been worth stopping for. She had been worth staying for, fighting for, building a whole life around. She had been the answer to questions he had not known how to ask, the home he had been searching for without realizing it. And their story, born from stubbornness and watered with love, had taken root in the desert and flourished beyond anything either of them could have dreamed. Antonio came out onto the porch, now a man of 30 with his own family. "Ma, Pa, dinner is ready. Isabel made that stew you like, and James is here with his wife and the new baby." "Everyone is waiting." Cole and Alina stood slowly, helping each other up with the comfortable ease of long partnership. They walked inside together, into the warmth and light and noise of family, into the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. As they gathered around the long table Cole had made years ago, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Alina caught Cole's eye across the chaos. He smiled at her and she smiled back, and in that exchange was everything they needed to say. "Thank you, I love you, we did it. We built something beautiful." After dinner, when the younger children had been put to bed and the adults lingered over coffee, James raised his cup in a toast. "To Ma and Pa," he said, his voice carrying over the conversations. "For showing us what it means to fight for what you love, to never give up, to make gardens grow where everyone said nothing could live. Everything we are, everything we have, starts with the two of you and the life you built together." Everyone raised their cups, echoing the toast, and Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was what mattered. Not the land itself, though the land was important. Not the money they had earned or the reputation they had built, though those things had their place. What mattered was the love that filled this house, the family they had created, the legacy they would leave behind. "Your mother did all the hard work," Cole said when he could speak. "I just helped a little." "That is not true," Alina protested. "We did it together. Everything we accomplished as partners. That is what I hope you all remember. Find someone you can partner with, someone who makes you stronger, someone who believes in the same things you do. Then hold on to them and build something beautiful together." Later, when everyone had finally gone to their own homes or to bed in one of the many rooms of the house, Cole and Alina prepared for sleep in the bedroom they had shared for 3 decades. It was a familiar ritual, comfortable and peaceful, the end of another good day in a long string of good days. "Do you have any regrets?" Alina asked as they lay in bed, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Not a single one," Cole said honestly. "Do you?" "Only that we did not have more time. That life is not longer, so we could have more years together." Alina's voice was soft, thoughtful. "But I suppose that is greedy. We have been blessed with so much. A long marriage, healthy children, a thriving ranch, more than most people ever get." "We have been blessed," Cole agreed. "And we earned every bit of it through hard work and stubborn refusal to quit. Just like that garden of yours, growing where it should not, thriving because you would not let it die. That has been our whole life together, making the impossible possible through sheer determination." "And love," Alina added. "Do not forget the love." "Never," Cole promised. "The love is what makes it all worthwhile." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, content and grateful for the life they had built, for the love they had found, for the legacy they would leave behind. The years continued to pass, gentler now, easier. Cole and Alina gradually turned over more responsibility to their children, trusting them to carry on what had been started so long ago. They became advisors rather than operators, grandparents rather than parents, elders of a community that had grown up around the success of their ranch. Other settlers had followed their example, learning from their techniques, copying their irrigation systems, proving that the desert could support more life than anyone had thought possible. The area around Coyote Springs had transformed from empty wasteland to a thriving agricultural region, and everyone knew it had started with Alina Vasquez and her impossible garden. On a warm spring day, when Cole was 73 and Alina was 71, they walked together through the original garden, the one that had started everything. It was still there, still producing, though it was now more of a memorial than a working garden. Their children kept it maintained as a reminder of where they had come from, of what determination and love could accomplish. Do you remember the first day you saw this place? Alina asked, stopping to examine a tomato plant heavy with fruit. What you thought when you saw vegetables growing where nothing should live. I thought it was a miracle, Cole said. And I was right, it was a miracle, you were a miracle, still are. Alina laughed, the sound as beautiful to him now as it had been decades ago. I was just stubborn. Anyone this stubborn belongs here, Cole quoted, the words that had become their motto, their inside joke, their truth. And you did belong here, we both did. This land needed us as much as we needed it. They walked back to the house slowly, taking their time, enjoying the warm sun and the cool breeze. When they reached the porch, they sat in the chairs that had become theirs by right of long use, looking out over everything they had built. It was a good life, Alina said quietly. Cole corrected, it is a good life, we are not done yet. No, Alina agreed, smiling, not yet. They sat together in companionable silence, hands linked, watching the sun travel across the sky over the land they loved, the home they had built, the garden that had brought them together. And if the afternoon stretched out peacefully, filled with the sounds of family and the sight of green growing things thriving in impossible dirt, well, that was exactly as it should be. Because this was their story, their legacy, their truth. Two stubborn souls who had found each other in the desert, who had refused to give up on love or land or each other, who had built something beautiful from nothing but determination and hope. And gardens still grew in the driest dirt, proof that miracles happened when stubbornness met love, when two people decided that belonging was worth fighting for, when home was not just a place, but a promise kept every single day. Their story would be told for generations in that corner of Arizona, the tale of the cowboy who found her garden growing where nothing should live, who looked at the woman who had planted it and said, anyone this stubborn belongs here. It would be told as a love story, as an example of what could be accomplished through determination, as proof that the best things in life came not from easy circumstances, but from hard work and stubborn refusal to quit. And every time someone told the story, they would end the same way, with two old people sitting on a porch, hands linked, looking out over the life they had built together, content in the knowledge that they had found what they were looking for, that they had belonged to each other and to this land, that their love had been the greatest garden of all, growing strong and beautiful in the driest dirt imaginable. That was their story, that was their truth. That was their legacy, passed down through children and grandchildren, through the land itself, through the garden that still bloomed decades after it should have died, testament to what was possible when stubborn met stubborn and love made it all worthwhile. And somewhere in the desert wind, if you listened carefully, you could still hear the echo of Cole's words from that first day. Anyone this stubborn belongs here. Words that had changed two lives, that had started a legacy, that had proved that the impossible was just another word for difficult, and difficult was something that stubborn people conquered every single day. The end.